I just got done watching one of my favorite shows, and I thought I'd mention it and talk about it because it demonstrates at least two economic principles that I think are poorly understood. And even though it never talks about them explicitly, it demonstrates them repeatedly in every show, and that show is Pawn Stars. If you aren't familiar with it, it's just one of those shows on the History Channel that I think that they try and make on the cheap. They just basically find some business or some people that do something they think is interesting, and they basically just film it. So it probably has low production costs. But you know, uh, the typical show is a series of events where customers or people bring in some kind of item varying from a car to a gun to gold or silver to art to whatever, and attempts to sell it to the pawn shop, who then usually end up haggling. And I think that there are two real common, uh, there are two economic principles that are in the show almost every time this happens that are poorly understood. One is the subjective theory of value. Uh, this isn't a principle. Most economists don't believe in this. Even non-Austrian economics professionals do not adhere to a labor theory of value. They believe in a subjective theory of value. But most people don't. Most people uh, seem to think that value is some kind of an objective physical trait of a good, and that's just not the case. And uh, they never explicitly discuss it in the show, but that's always under the surface of everything they do. He'll come and say, well, this is junk to some people, but other people are willing to pay a whole lot. Or what they've been saying recently is 2 years ago this would have been worth a lot more, but because of the depression, people aren't willing to pay as much. Now, if value is some objective thing, then that shouldn't matter. Uh, if it's some property that is innate to the good, then the conditions of the economy as a whole are completely irrelevant to that. So, I mean, that could be its whole video right there, is um, the subjective theory of value. But they basically go over it all the time. Now, the other thing is price. Price also, and I think this might be a problem with the terminology. I heard Guido Hulsmann one time say price is only a historical detail. We don't know what a price is until after an exchange is made. So and the thing is when people ask for a price, that is usually considered to be the price. So if I were to set up a lemonade stand and I said $500 a glass, most people would tend to say, well, the price is $500 a glass. But if I don't sell any of that lemonade, if it sits there and nobody's willing to pay it, then uh, we don't even know what the price is. Now, if someone comes and pays me $500, then we do know, yeah, the price paid for that, at least that particular glass, was $500. That's a fact. But what's more likely to happen is nobody will pay at that price, and somebody will come and say, well, I'll pay less, and whatever we agree on, that's the actual price. We don't know it until the two parties agree. And here again, this is, I think people will understand that at least. So if we say, okay, well, I asked for 500 and for a glass of lemonade, and I ended up only selling it for $1. What was the price? Most people will realize that, well, the price was the $1, not the 500. But a priori, they a lot of times think that, well, that asking price, what we could call the asking price, that's the actual price. And this is, of course, a fallacy where people think that producers set prices, which is, of course, absurd. They can ask for whatever they want, but unless anybody agrees to it, then they're only setting an asking price, not the actual price. And again, the show demonstrates this very well, because basically every single time, or nearly every time, the person trying to sell the good says, I want X amount, and they almost always, not always, but almost always say, no, we will pay less, and they haggle. And the actual price is only what is finally paid. And in situations where they don't pay, which is not that uncommon, you don't actually know what the price is, and you won't know until someone settles on it. And so I don't know if there's a better term. I want to say asking price and regular price, but most people conflate the two. But it's both these theories. The fallacies that people have about them are the basis for many bad conclusions. You know, the idea that um, I don't know how many times I've been told that producers dictate prices. That's not true. They can't dictate prices. They can ask for whatever they want, but if people don't agree to it, then that's not what it will sell. The way this comes out in the market is they'll put a price, and if they can't clear their inventory, they have to lower it. You know, they either have to just get rid of it, in which case they have to spend extra money to dispose of it, or they lower the price until they can sell, until they can clear. And it's clear that they can't just dictate whatever they want, as opposed to the government, which can actually dictate. They can say, okay, this is your tax revenue, this is how much you owe us in taxes, end of story. There's no consensus, no agreement between the parties there. And so, I don't know, I think people may say, well, this is kind of an unusual show. They're dealing with you know, single items, specialty items, but the principle is exactly the same. You know, McDonald's can't just tomorrow say, okay, Big Macs are $25. You know, they can't. They can say that, but they can't hope to sell any at that price. The haggling is going to occur not between any one person, but the entire arbitrage of the market will do that. It's based on the on all the potential consumers and all the potential sellers. Now with a specialty item, you're only going to deal with two, or if it's really specialized, only two. That's the minimum. With items where there's many different sellers and many different buyers, you'll be dealing with more than just two, but it's the same process. So this isn't a recommendation that you should watch the show, but I just like it for that reason. It's always out in the open. It's not the only show that does that. I believe there's several shows based on pawn shops now, and there's a couple other shows where haggling takes place. But I think it's very valuable, and rather than do a video on each of those two topics, I thought I'd just give it out a shout out for Pawn Stars and mention it that way. All right, that's it.